min snappa in snappa di lusecho in alla il slime di vardecho so min snappa in snappa di lusecho in alla il slime di vardecho ai so min snappa in snappa di lusecho in alla il slime di vardecho so min snappa in snappa di lusecho.
Hello everyone, this is the second in the segment of Lighting the Menorah in Shul over Hanukkah. And last time we basically gave the reasons for this custom, and if I can divide them into two, one reason was to ultimately remember what was in the temple, in our small temples in our Shul, but the other reasons were to publicize the miracle. However, that second reason divided into two. The Rivosh said that since sometimes you live in a place where you can't publicize the miracle, you live in a basement or very high up in a building, or you live in a place where it's dangerous to put a menorah outside, you can't publicize the miracle, but in Shul for sure there'll be people. But the Gra came along and said no, regardless of where you live. Even if you can publicize the miracle at home, anytime there's an obligation to publicize a miracle, like on Hanukkah, Purim, and Pesach, there's an obligation to do it as a community in Shul. And therefore he said it's like Hallel on the night of Pesach in Shul. We do it at home, but we do it in Shul as a community. And it's exactly those 2 points of view that I'd like to ask a very simple question. Is there a ramification between them? At the end of the day, they both say it's a means to publicize the miracle, either a communal publication of the miracle or just publicizing the miracle in front of people. And in my humble opinion, there is. And the question is, first and foremost, when do you light the menorah? So, as everybody knows, we usually light the menorah between Mincha and Ma'ariv, and that's what the Ramah says, Nohagim ladlik bebet hakneset ben Mincha leMa'ariv. Explains the Mishnah Brura, Afilo anohagim ladlik b'choyom b'tzeit hakochavim, even if at home you only light after dark, after the stars come out, bebet hakneset nohagim achar mincha b'sha'ah sha'olam mekubatzim. In Shul you do it when people are together. And when are they together? Between Mincha and Ma'ariv. In other words, there's no importance to the fact that there's Mincha and Ma'ariv is about to come. It happens to be a time that's an opportune time to publicize the miracle. So therefore, the Rivash would say, if you can't publicize the miracle at home, this is the time to do it. There's people in Shul. But the Gra said a little differently. He said there's a communal obligation called publication of the miracle, publicizing the miracle as a community. Therefore, you need to be a community. So ultimately, as Rav Soloveitchik said, as quoted by Rav Shechter, the chovat hayachid tachlita l'shem persum meinesa hofechet liot gam chovat hatzibur. We have to ask, when do we become a tzibur? When do we become a community? And the answer is when the community comes together for one common purpose, and that is to daven Ma'ariv. They already daven Mincha, and they're about to daven Ma'ariv. So it's not just an opportune time because people are there. It's that they became a community simply because they came together for one goal, to about to daven Ma'ariv. From this perspective, it's not enough to have people in a room. You have to have people united in order to do something that they can only do as a community. Only as a community they could say Baruch Hu before Ma'ariv, Kaddish before the Amidah, the full Kaddish after the Amidah. If they're united for that reason, that communal obligation can be fulfilled. Second ramification. What do we do on Erev Shabbos? On Erev Shabbos, you can't light the menorah after Mincha. Usually it's too late. So what do we do? The Ramah says, Yesh noagim like Erev Shabbos kodem Mincha. We light the menorah before Mincha. Well, before Mincha, what brings us together as a community? The answer is nothing. If there happens to be people there, great. And if there aren't people there, comes along the Magen Avraham and says, no problem. I'll tell you why. Because eventually there'll be people there. Eventually you'll publicize the miracle, and no problem. So if the whole idea is to publicize the miracle, so you light the menorah now, and you publicize the miracle in 20 minutes from now. So from this perspective, light the menorah before Mincha, daven Mincha. Eventually there'll be a big minyan there for Kabbalah, Shabbos, and Ma'ariv, and they'll see the menorah. But as everybody remembers, the Gra said no. There has to be a communal Pirsumei Nisa. And from this perspective, not everyone agrees with the Ramah. Even on Erev Shabbos, the Magen Avraham quotes that the Dogel Melvarva says we don't do that. We do it between Mincha and Ma'ariv, even our Erev Shabbos, so you have to make Mincha a touch earlier. And Rav Yaakov Emden was very strong in saying, Ein lahadlik bi bracha yimensha masara bevet hakneset. You don't make a bracha unless there's a minyan there. From this perspective, as he says, the only time that you can make a bracha in shul on the menorah is if you have a tzibur, if you have a community. And when do you have a community? If they're united for one goal. And what's that goal? To do something together they can't do alone. Namely, either before Ma'ariv or before Mincha on Erev Shabbos. They can't say Kaddish before Mincha. They can't say Kaddish Tiskabel after Mincha without a minyan. Then they're a community. But if no one's there, absolutely no lighting of the menorah. In the words of Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, as quoted by Rav Shechter, ultimately the same thing is true at the opposite side. Motzei Shabbos, everybody knows that at home, different minhagim, but in shul, the regular minhag is to light the menorah and then to say Havdalah. Why? Says Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, there's no way to light the menorah early because it's still Shabbos. You have to wait till it's dark. So you already daven Ma'ariv. You said Atachon Antana. You did Havdalah in davening. Now you can light the menorah. So ultimately, they still have to be united for a goal. What's the goal? Either to say Kaddish Tiskabel, and therefore in Brisk, the custom was to light the menorah before Vihi Noam, before Kaddish Tiskabel. In other words, there's still something we need to be united for on the agenda. Or he said, even if you already said Kaddish Tiskabel, since Motzei Shabbos, there's a takana in shul to say Havdalah, therefore, he said, it would be you're united for that goal. So you would light the menorah before that Havdalah. How did Rav Moshe Soloveitchik prove his point with Havdalah? Very simply. He said that on Erev Shabbos, if the community accepted Shabbos, then you have no choice. It falls on you as well. Same thing on Motzei Shabbos. If the community continues Shabbos into Motzei Shabbos, ultimately, the majority rules. Until they take out Shabbos, it's still Shabbos for you. So from this perspective, until they say Havdalah, it's still Shabbos for you. And therefore, the best thing to do, he said, is that because Havdalah has that power to say, oh, now Shabbos is over for the community, there's still a communal obligation we need to do. It's still on the agenda. In a word, unless there's something still on the agenda, you can't light the menorah. And if there's no minyan there, for sure you can't light the menorah. But if there is still something on the agenda that can only be done with a minyan, that's only done with a minyan, then and only then you can light the menorah. To sum up, indeed, difference of opinion between the Gra and the Rivash. The Rivash said it's just a way to publicize a miracle. So therefore, if there's not a minyan in shul, but eventually there will be, you can light the menorah. Rav Moshe Soloveitchik said no. Based on the Gra, it has to be a communal something on the agenda that still didn't happen, that they're all united for. And if that's not the case, you do not light the menorah. And for sure, you don't light it if there's no minyan there.